We'll now move on to the final one of the substantive papers for this morning, which is from Rainer Schreg and Aline Kottman, talking about Germany. Rainer is a professor of archaeology at the Institute for Archaeological Science, Historical Monuments and Art History at Bamberg University. His research interests are in social and ecological backgrounds of cultural transformation. Besides several projects in various landscapes of Europe, he has conducted excavations and studies of material culture in Panama with a German team. Aline Kottman is employed at the State Office for Cultural Heritage Management at Baden-Württemberg, where she has worked since 2018 in operational archaeology. And she is also responsible for excavations of primary focus in medieval archaeology. So thank you very much for agreeing to speak this morning, Rainer and Aline. The floor is now yours.
Okay, so thank you very much for the opportunity to present the situation in Germany. And as you already recognized, we will share this presentation. So I'm from the university, and Aline Kottmann, she's from the State Department. So she is involved in the practical work outside, and my part is maybe rather to try to have a synthesis and to see the impact for research. So, but to start with, we will need to make some statements about the situation of heritage management in Germany. So you may know Germany has 16 federal states. That means we have 16 heritage laws. And in fact, we have more than 16 state offices in these different federal states. In most federal states, the historic monuments protection authorities are at the communal or at a regional level. So they are related to the to towns and communities. Only in some few cases, there are some archaeologists, some specialists in these offices. So the expertise, this comes from the state departments of cultural heritage. And their competences are quite different in these federal states. What is the situation today is in most federal states, we have the cost by cause principle. And we have a treasure trove in most countries. The one exception is Bavaria, which has some impact on the aspects of metal detecting. Only in some federal states, we have commercial archaeology. So it changed in recent years, for example, in Baden-Württemberg, where it's only the situation for, I think, 3 years ago. Or in Rheinland-Pfalz, there is still today no commercial archaeology. So big differences in these different federal states. If we come to infrastructure projects, we will first have a focus on linear projects. And in fact, it was the German reunification after the 1990s, which had a major impact on the archaeology in Germany. On the one hand, we had new heritage laws in the new federal states of Eastern Germany. And we had huge projects, as for example, the German Unification Transport Project, which includes the construction of motorways, high-speed rail lines, for example, from Berlin to Munich. But again, dependent from the federal states, the intensity of the archaeology in these projects was quite different. I will we will give you some examples of these projects, and I will start with one of the first ones. It was the construction of the canal between the Rhine and the Danube, the Main-Danube Canal. It affected the federal state of Bavaria, and it was constructed in the time between 1960 and 1996. Archaeological excavations started quite late, and they concentrated on some selected sites. And these were, in most cases, prehistoric sites. One important exception for medieval archaeology, this was the region of Kelheim. So you can see in this aerial photograph the medieval town of Kelheim, which is here between the river of the Danube and the Altmühl, which flows here into the Danube. In this situation, the first large-scale excavations on medieval rural settlements close to the later town have been made. It was a situation where early and high medieval settlement traces have been excavated on some, and the analysis of the materials showed some large-scale translocation. So we have this shifting settlement situation. What was important in that settlement was the excavation of some post-Merovingian burial grounds dated by radiocarbon dates, which is quite interesting in the relation between cemeteries and villages. It was a motorway construction which affected a situation close by, also in Bavaria at Großhöbing. It was in 1997 when excavations there brought a lot of traces of the early and high medieval cultural landscape. On the one hand, there was a Merovingian cemetery, but we also had quite many situations related with the small creek there, which was in fact a very important transportation line in the early Middle Ages between the Danube in the Main area. And so we had some traces of iron melting, we had some traces of fishing, there were some boats found in this creek. So it was a very interesting situation to understand the early medieval and high medieval cultural landscape. These are just the first two examples of quite different linear infrastructure projects across southern Germany. So we will concentrate a little bit on the southern part of Germany, Rhineland-Pfalz, Baden-Württemberg, and Bayern. So what I have shown you at the very beginning, Kelheim was located here, and Großhöbing is around here. So these are two examples from Bavaria. And you can see in this map, which shows just some selected projects from these recent years, many of these linear infrastructure projects. For example, there is a Ethylen pipeline here in red, crossing all three federal states. And it's interesting to see how different the archaeology worked in these three states. I will just pick up one example from this excavation, which comes from Rhineland-Pfalz. So this pipeline was constructed 2007 to 2011. It was only 10 meters wide, but 370 kilometers long. And as I said before, it crossed three federal states. The statistics you can see here on the left side, that's only the situation from Rhineland-Pfalz, but it's quite typical. So you have quite a lot of prehistoric sites, but it's medieval archaeology is represented rather weak. We have some modern sites which haven't found that interest. We would think it would be worth to have more focus on that. One site from this situation that's close to Rhein-Zabern, which is known among archaeologists, probably because of their Roman terra sigillata production. So what was interesting here now, this is a pottery kiln from the medieval times, from the 12th century. You can see this in that picture here. And close by a Merovingian burial ground. So no, yeah, some small traces of a medieval settlement of the 11th, 12th century. This is one of the rather scarce examples of medieval sites from that pipeline. So to go on, we go to Baden-Württemberg, and I will give over to Aline.
Oh, yes. Hello, everybody. What I want to stress is that in southern Germany, the region we are talking about, linear projects have been archaeologically surveyed for only a good 20 years now. So much later than, for example, in the eastern states. Like Rainer said, this was due to the construction boom there immediately after the fall of the wall. In many federal states in the south, there are now special planning offices for these supra-regional plans for the linear projects, including Baden-Württemberg, where we have a planning authority since 2006. And what we already saw in all of our papers and presentations is that all linear projects lead to an extreme increase in the number of known sites, often 10-fold, 5 to 10-fold the number we knew before. And also that linear projects can offer the possibility to extrapolate and propose models of land use and environment on a regional scale. And that's one of the reasons why we have an extra planning authority for those projects. So here we concentrate on the impact on medieval settlement research, and I will specifically refer to some of the results of a new railway route for the high-speed train ICE from Stuttgart to Ulm, which was in part combined with the enlargement of the neighboring highway, the A8, the so-called Stuttgart 21 project. You can see this. Oh, next slide, please, Rainer. Could you, yes. Oh no, can we, yes. Okay, here you can see this route from Stuttgart 21 crossing the Swabian Karst Mountains. The archaeological research here was carried out between 2010 and 2016 and included preceding geomagnetic LiDAR and fieldworking surveys, so that the then priorly known sites could be investigated in advance. The consumed area of the two traffic routes and the necessary work areas reached an area of more than 400 hectares. And especially this part I show on the slide, crossing the high plains of the Swabian Karst Mountains, was always thought to be hostile for prehistoric settlers because of the natural lack of surface water. The trenches done for this linear project proved us wrong. There were settlements of all periods with a special focus on the Iron Age, like we saw in Denmark earlier on. So we can see linear projects offer not only additional sites, but also give new insights into the interpretation of archaeological landscapes. What was for us really striking is the lack of sites dating to high and late medieval times compared to all pre- and proto-historic periods. However, new discoveries of the early periods, so mainly the periods from migration time to the 11th century, are in general more frequent in linear projects than later medieval sites. This may be due to the fact that the routes avoid the immediate vicinity of existing settlements, and that would support the thesis that site constancy can be expected in our region from the 12th century at the latest. What is extraordinarily rare in linear projects are late medieval deserted villages. We do not yet know the backgrounds for this. It may be due to the choice of routing, which itself can be due to natural circumstances, but these choices are not up for debate in the instance of planning advice from the heritage offices. Can you turn over to the next slide, please, Rainer? Yes, here again, one special area of this project showing mainly prehistoric sites, but in pink you see two early medieval sites. These are burials, and burials are a very common chance discovery as in this linear project. Here you can see the example of Unterboingen, a burial site stemming from the Merovingian period. Can you click? Yes, with really nice burial gifts like this comb with a well-conserved and decorated case. It seems that the distribution map of the rather unspectacular, less densely occupied sites of the early Alemannic period can be significantly complemented by linear projects that serve here as a kind of accidental sondage. But also other rare archaeological sources, such as migration period or early medieval settlements, are uncovered relatively frequently. Next slide, or next picture, please. This is the example of Nellingen, a migration period settlement that was discovered close to a Roman road in the Stuttgart 21 project. We found several three-aisled houses, a type that was for a long time only known from northern Germany. You can see this on this digital terrain model with, you can see the street, and yes, up there, these orange dots that Rainer is pointing to, these are the houses dating to the migration period. So next slide. What we also wanted to mention are non-linear projects referring to development projects, but also to large-scale constructions, as for example, wind parks, solar fields, and open pit mining for coal, for example, or gravel. But also large development projects like industrial zones that by now were mainly adjacent to existing built areas, but in the next future probably will also be built close to highways. Then we have a very recent and strong housing shortage in many parts of Germany that leads to the expansion of rural villages, but also to the re-densification of the existing villages, which affects the historical village centers. And that's the next example I want to show you. Those development projects in the villages, in the centers of villages, especially lead to results dating to the time after the 11th and 12th century, but actually also in more and more cases dating to earlier times, even as early as the 6th century. Here we can see Steinheim. The area in question is in a pink frame at the bottom of the slide in this map dating to the 1820s. Nowadays, the area is included into the village center and was only kept empty by chance until today. For us, this was a so-called suspicion area, and what we do here is first trial trenches that you can see on the photograph on top. And then, next slide, please. In this case, it led to a rescue excavation of the whole area. And we found a settlement with continuity from the 6th to the 12th century with a peak between the 7th and the 9th century. And it was very exciting because we found remains of iron smelting facilities that used the local ores, so-called Bohnerz, which are nodules of iron concretions that are natural in the karst rock on this Swabian karst area. Also, and I want to stress this, new patterns concerning human off-site activities, for example, that's what we saw already on earlier slides, streets, mills like in Großhöbing, or diverse forms of water management can only or priorly be detected by chance. And that's what these linear projects are very good for. I want to include an old field system and a production site that both lay apart from the settled area to the theme reconstructing the former cultural landscape. Rainer, could you click one more time? Genau. The expansion of the old village in Albershausen has led to a new focus on ridge and furrow fields. This time for this example was due to an expansion of the village of Albershausen. Ridge and furrow cultivation was a widespread agricultural technique in Northern and Central Europe whose origins are not yet clear. The results of optically stimulated luminescence and radiocarbon dating from Albershausen seem to indicate that the beginnings date back to early medieval times and date forward up to early modern times, proposing a long establishment for this cultivation technique. And we are at the moment trying to do research on more of these kinds of archaeological sources that are already visible in the digital terrain models. So next slide. This is the promised production site, an off-site site. Again, its detection was due to the railway route Stuttgart 21. In Eichelberg, a high medieval iron smelting site was found using the local dogger ores. The melting furnaces here in bright orange and other fireplaces were dispersed in a large area and in one case protected by a small circular enclosure and far apart from every settlement and not visible at the surface at all. So now I want to hand over to Rainer again. Thank you very much.
Yes, before we come to some conclusions, I will introduce you to the German brown coal mining. We already heard something about the situation in the Czech Republic, and I will refer to the brown coal mining in the Rhineland, west of Cologne, which is in fact not really an investment archaeology because it's just the consumption of coal. And as you may know, Germany will cease coal mining in 2038, which in fact means it's still going on. It started already in the mid of the 20th century, and we have quite a lot of villages destroyed by the brown coal mining. But in fact, already in the 1950s, there were excavations at the village of Morken, which excavated the church, some Merovingian burials, a Roman villa, and also some settlement traces in the center of the village. And it excavated the moated site of Husterknupp just nearby. So already since the 1950s, it was quite well known about the potentials of brown coal mining for understanding medieval landscapes. And in fact, these first experiences in the 1950s led to large-scale surveys in the 1960s and to a fundamental study by Walter Janssen in 1975. He claimed the need for excavation of whole villages, and he recognized it shouldn't be only churches and manor houses selected, but we should also include farmsteads and economic aspects in this research. He has seen the brown coal mining as a chance for understanding medieval settlement landscapes. So this was already more than 40 years ago.
Got 2 minutes, Rainer.
Yeah, okay. So you can see at that slide with the red dots, all the villages destroyed, and you can see with the green dot, the only settlement where it was possible to do at least some excavations within the, in the meantime, destroyed village. The problem is we have no building archaeology by now, just very few excavated villages, especially no excavations in historical centers, some small exceptions. The principle of costs by cause is in theory valid for this brown coal mining, but in fact, it was discharged by the invention of a foundation in the 1990s, which is the basis for funding projects now. And it's quite low annual yield, which doesn't make it possible to do any large-scale excavations at the moment. So it's mainly some small university projects applying for that money who try to do projects there. The State Department has a small office there with some people, with a small staff, which is involved in the archaeology there. But in fact, after 40 years, it's not a quite good balance of the situation. I'm currently involved in a small project, which is involved with the village of Mannheim, which will destroy it in the next years. So no excavations are possible there. Maybe some small chances will be left. And so we made 100 shovel tests in the former village center in order to understand the distribution of ceramic finds and to see the dynamics. The problem is we haven't found the early Middle Ages, which should be there according to the village name, to the place name, according to written documents. So it's again the same situation. It's nearly impossible to do real research on that site. What we can see now in the conclusions, this is that different kind of projects bring different aspects of the medieval settlement history. In fact, nearly all archaeological data related to medieval villages in southern Germany come from development-driven archaeology, but these recent large-scale projects did not cause a progress, the progress we still need to have a better understanding for this medieval development of cultural landscapes. So we have these different types of projects, and they have different relevance for medieval rural settlements. The linear projects, which are often in some distance from currently occupied settlements, they bring occasional finds of poorly detectable sites, for example, the migration period settlements and burials. But they have quite few impact on late medieval deserted settlements. Development areas close to historical village centers, they bring often early medieval sites predating village formation. Excavations within the villages, as for example, the redensification, brings aspects of continuity, and it has quite a lot of late medieval and post-medieval structures. The large-scale open-pit mining, which is in fact a very important chance for understanding cultural landscapes, it just misses its possibility because of the political situation in that area. So in theory, we have the possibility to catch the long-term development on this large-scale excavation or large-scale research areas. So we have quite a lot of challenges in that field, different strategies in different federal states. And if we compare in this map, the size of archaeological excavations in Germany done on medieval rural sites with the situation, for example, in France, you can see that in average the excavations done in Germany are a little bit smaller than elsewhere. We have, in fact, a problem with that situation that analysis is not covered by the cost by cost principle, and we have in problem also in Germany we also have the problem we don't have national database, we have no systematic reporting and no online repositories, in fact, reporting of all the excavations done, and their publication is a little bit a problem. Thank you for your attention.